Hi, everyone. It's Michelle here, and I'm so excited to welcome you to the Wellspot. This is my brand new video YouTube series, and I'm going to introduce you to the most inspiring wellness leaders I know as they just open up and share how they balance and juggle the demands of life while also staying well. So today we have the honor of starting with Tami Robinson. She is a yoga teacher, a coach, and an author who is really into the Great Yoga Wall. Now, this is a unique practice I had never heard about, and I'm excited to just learn more as we sit here together. So the whole aim of the Wellspot is to just remind you that you can break free from whatever holds you back, and you can become whoever you want in this life. And tapping an emotional freedom technique is not the only way to get there. So this is a way for you to get out of your head into your heart so you can raise your frequency. So I will just get started. So Tami and I actually connected in the Origin community with Kate Northrup, and it's all about doing less and just living more and working in like a sustainable way. And so I'm just going to ask Tami, like, is there anything that's going on or happened in your life that you didn't expect and it kind of surprised you?
Oh my goodness, so many things, Michelle. But first, I just wanted to say thank you. I'm so excited to be here and share this time with you. And yeah, so many things, right? I think life is kind of an ongoing experiment in the unexpected. And two things in particular pop into my mind when I think about this question. And so one of them is that I never expected to be running my own business, which I'm doing. And I also never expected to be the lead instructor for this amazing yoga prop called the Great Yoga Wall, which you mentioned, and we'll talk a little bit more about. So the quick story is, I had practiced yoga off and on since I was a child. And I came to it as a daily practice when I was working for the US federal government doing national security related research and analysis. My local yoga studio got a great yoga wall, and I fell in love with it. So much so that they asked the studio director asked, "Hey, do you want to go and study with the man who created the training for this yoga prop and come back here and teach it for the studio?" Now, at the time in my job, I had a once in a career success. My colleagues and I, we had solved the problem that we were working on. And so I had transitioned into teaching leadership development as I was thinking about the next steps in my career. So I went and did this training out in California while I was living in Washington, D.C. And I absolutely loved it. Within months, I went back for the level 2 version of the training, and I started commuting across the country to do yoga teacher training, the full-on yoga teacher training. And within a year of having gone to that very first training, I left my stable yet hectic federal government job to go out and study full-time with this teacher. His name was Brian Legier. And when I left, I ended up opening my own business, doing some consulting and professional development coaching, and of course, teaching yoga. Now, we did all kinds of fun, great yoga wall projects together. And I was kind of his right woman or right person, right next to him in all of the great yoga wall activities. And unfortunately, in 2019, all too soon, Brian left his body and passed on to the other side. And a little while after, his wife called me and asked me to carry on his legacy of this great yoga wall training. And though I really, really wish that Brian was still here to do this training, I'm really, really honored to be able to step into his shoes and be able to carry on this great work that he created. So that's kind of the quick story of these two unexpected things of kind of falling into my own business and this great yoga wall training.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. I love how you must have just been so in tune with your intuition to know that you had success in the first career, which is to me very different, maybe more linear minded than getting into yoga and coaching, which, as your own business, it's a complete adventure. And that must have been really hard to go through that training and having Brian transition into spirit and then say to yourself, oh, I'm sure you were still practicing, but what an honor that his wife called you on the phone and thought of you and to carry on his teachings. That must have felt really good.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, of course, mixed feelings, right? Like
Yeah.
he was a really, really special teacher. And, I've got a picture of him up above my great yoga wall behind me here to remind me of all that he shared with me and his, generosity in his time here. But it was really tough in the beginning to teach this work, knowing that it was me now instead of him. So
Mhm.
yeah, some big transitions for sure.
Wow. Well, that to me, that just says a lot about you, rising to the occasion and making it work as best as you can.
Oh, thank
Um,
you.
so I had never heard of the Great Yoga Wall before, and I didn't even look it up. I kind of like I like for happenstance to just reveal to me the information in time. And so I literally pictured this wall, I guess, that you climb with shoes. And is that what that is? Like, what is behind you? Can you explain what the Great Yoga Wall is and maybe what it's the benefits of trying this practice?
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. So no, of course, there's no shoes required. We practice in barefoot, just like we do the rest of yoga. And you can see it behind me here, and I'll show you in a minute why it's so, so special. But the first thing I want to say is just to give you a little bit of background. In the ancient yogis, they would sometimes hang from tree limbs and from vines to help change the way that their bodies related to gravity. And that in doing so, they believed that it would help decompress the spine, open up the joints, reverse blood flow, and stretch the muscles just in different and beneficial ways. And so modern yogis took this concept in two directions. So one is aerial yoga, which many of us have seen. It involves silks that hang from the ceiling, from hooks from the ceiling. The other direction is something called the rope wall, with ropes tied to hooks at various heights along a wall. Now, in particular, Mr. BKS Iyengar took the rope wall concept and developed a multitude of ways to use the ropes to enhance physical postures and create therapeutic applications of the poses and to make them just much more accessible and in some cases more beneficial and effective depending on what's going on in someone's body. So the early rope walls, they got the job done, but they had their drawbacks. It was difficult to adjust the lengths of the ropes because they were basically tied on to hooks. At the same time, these hooks are like sticking out of the wall. So if you wanted to do something with your back to the wall, you'd have a hook in your back. And so in the 1990s, a really, really great yogi in LA named Kedrick Wolf, he kicked up into a handstand with his back to the wall and he hit his foot on one of these hooks. And he came down, he was injured, and he had a light bulb moment and said, you know what, there's got to be a better way. And so he set about to creating the system that we know of today as the Great Yoga Wall, and which you see behind me. So what's really interesting about the Great Yoga Wall is that instead of hooks sticking out of the wall, we have plates that are flush against the wall. So nothing's sticking out. The other thing is that you can move the belts all around. So if you wanted to, you can move it here, here, all over the place, right? And you can adjust the lengths of the belt really, really easily. And so if you wanted to do a pose with your back to the wall, no problem. You can simply stand like so. And you've got your back to the wall with no hooks coming into your back. If you wanted to change the angle that you were working at, the angle of pull, you can do so. You can go upside down for people who have a hard time doing inversions on their own. There's all kinds of different ways to play with the Great Yoga Wall. So Kedrick created it. And then my teacher, Brian, created the business to make this technology available widely to yoga studios throughout the world. Brian also created the training program that goes along with it, because as you can imagine, anytime we're hanging from something, there are safety considerations that need to be taken into account. Now, there's also a lot more than just ropes on this Great Yoga Wall. There are special belts that allow us to traction the lumbar spine and the low back. There are bars you can hook onto the wall, so you can do bar work as well. There are even stretch bands for Pilates. So there's all kinds of things that you can do with it.
That is amazing. So I'm on the East Coast in New Jersey, and there are so many yoga I mean, I've taken yoga from there's so many different types of yoga, but I can't believe I've never heard of this. It's so versatile, and you can really customize it to whatever class you're taking. That's so cool.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I really love about it is it's not just physical benefits that you get from it. So oftentimes for example, when someone goes upside down and they're not typically able to go upside down, they feel like a surge of excitement and confidence that come from being able to do something that they didn't think that they could do.
Yeah, that's huge. I would love to try that because, I've done legs up on the wall, the forward fold. Those are level one, right, of inversions. But I don't feel like I'm at the level of, or maybe it's a story in my mind that I can't do the handstand because there's probably so many modifications.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You would be surprised at what you can do with just a little bit of help and support from the yoga
Yeah,
ball. And the
that's so
releases that you
cool.
get are profoundly deep and energizing and just feel so good.
Yeah, I love that it's like a boost of confidence, and it makes you see your own practice and what you're capable of in a whole new light. That's cool.
Absolutely.
It
Yeah.
just made me think of a question. So, do people actually buy their own bands? I don't know if they're called bands, but do they buy their own, or does the yoga studio provide the straps?
That is a great question. So usually if you're practicing at a wall in a yoga studio, the studio has the belts
Okay.
available. And there are also swings that you can attach to the belts that help you do different things as well. So the yoga studio is going to have all the equipment
Mhm.
for the Great Yoga Wall. However, you can buy a smaller version of the yoga wall and fit it into your home practice space, and then have that and all the equipment available there.
That's cool. And do you feel like this is safe for all ages?
Yes, yes. As long as the person is practicing yoga. So typically with yoga, we would say for deeper practice, there's playful children's yoga, right? Where the kids are sitting around and playing. But when they come to a more serious practice, we usually prefer them to be around the age of 8. And that's for various physiological reasons,
Mhm.
which I won't bore you with the details with right now. So I would say 8 and up, absolutely, and definitely beneficial for seniors who might need a little bit more help with balance and strength.
Mhm. That's awesome. I love that. Okay, well, I would love to dive a little more into, who is Tami, without the great yoga wall into your practices off the mat. So in this go-go world where it's so demanding and sometimes you feel like you have to answer back when everyone texts us all the time. Like what do you do to stay focused on just your own self-care practice and, being of service in the world? Like how do you balance that?
Oh my goodness, this is such a good question because there are so many shiny objects and distractions these days, and it makes staying focused really an ongoing practice. And I would say for me that it starts with knowing and living what we call in yoga our dharma, my purpose, right? So once I know my purpose, I can kind of use that as a North Star or a guidepost for making decisions. So if an opportunity comes up, I can ask, okay, does this help me live my purpose? Nope. Okay, then let me let go and move on. Where it gets tricky is if your dharma is related to your work, if your purpose is related to your work, then when work opportunities arise, you might feel compelled to say yes and take on too much, ignore your self care, and then end up burned out. And that definitely happened to me multiple times, but especially when I was working for the federal government. So the question then becomes, how do you start to see your self care as also being in service to your purpose and to the greater good? And luckily, yoga has a wonderful, wonderful answer. And that is called the 8 limbs of yoga. So the physical postures that we do, that's just one limb of yoga. There are 8, and they're really designed to help you take care of yourself and to reduce the distractions that keep you from your purpose and from knowing who you truly are.
Mm.
And so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail with these, but I'll just highlight what those 8 limbs are. So there's something that we call the restraints. That's the first one. Second is the personal observances. The third one is the postures. The fourth one is control of the breath. Fifth is withdrawal of the senses. Sixth is concentration.
Mm.
Seventh is meditation. And the eighth is something that we call absorption or freedom. And so if you just look at this first limb, the restraints, and apply it to, let's say, an example of overworking for the sake of your purpose, in the name of your purpose. So the restraints are peace or nonviolence, truth, abundance or non-stealing, continence or moderation, and self-reliance or non-jealousy. And so even if you just take the simple concept of truth, right? If you practice truth, it can help you recognize when you're overdoing it and when you're pushing and doing too much. But if you're just like, no, go, 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 I'm just going to ignore, the signals that my body is giving me. I'm going to ignore the truth of my body. I'm going to ignore the truth that others may even be reflecting back to me and in their concern about me overworking. Then you kind of run into trouble, right?
Mm-hmm.
Same thing, if you look at the concept of peace or nonviolence, that can help you understand that overdoing it, rather than being something that's going to make you into a hero necessarily, it could be detrimental in the long run because you won't be able to serve anyone if you're burned out and laying in bed exhausted, right? So I could go on and on. There are lots more examples of how we can apply this, but you can see that it provides guidelines. The 8 limbs provide guidelines for helping us to stay focused on what's important. And those guidelines really all are about self-care.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Because I think when people are new to yoga, they just think, oh, I have to go upside down or I have to put myself in a pretzel, and I certainly can't meditate and sit there and quiet the mind. But if someone wanted to learn more about the 8 limbs of yoga, is that just reserved for the yoga teacher training or can you find it somewhere?
Not at all. Absolutely. So I tend to offer a class usually about once a year or so. I also incorporate it into every single class. We're going to be talking about some aspect of the 8 limbs of yoga as we're moving through the postures. It really becomes just a part of what some yoga teachers offer in addition to the physical practice. There are lots of great books. I would say getting a copy of something called the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali is a great place to start as well. There's lots of different translations
Hmm.
of those sutras. So I like BKS Iyengar's translation and also Swami Satchidananda's translation. Those are my
Okay.
go-tos.
Thank you so much for sharing that. We'll keep our eyes out for those ancient texts that are just filled with wisdom. So now I do find that a lot of people that I work with, mostly women, some men, but mostly women, they all have an issue with drawing the lines in the sand around them about what is okay with them and what is not okay with them. Just a fear of hurting people's feelings. They might be big-hearted and empathic and stuff like that. But I love to ask everybody's journey around boundaries. So for you in your life, like your personal life and your work life, like how did you learn to set boundaries? Is this something that was modeled in your family? Like how did you figure it out?
So, oh my goodness, it is something I have had to work really hard at learning. It was not necessarily modeled in my family. And
Mhm.
not that it's anyone's fault or that it's bad or wrong. I just think, we as a society don't do a lot to share about how to set boundaries and enforce boundaries. And so, I'm a recovering people pleaser, workaholic, emotional abuse survivor. And setting boundaries is something that I really had to work hard and learn how to do. And it's a constant work in progress for sure. The reason that I find it so challenging in particular is that there's like, for me, there's 4 different steps to it. So, one, there's realizing, having that awareness that a boundary is missing. Then working up the courage to actually set the boundary, and the discernment of knowing, okay, well, what boundary is it that needs to be set? And how do I go ahead and set that? And then the third thing is, well, what happens when someone just ignores that boundary that you set? So you've got to enforce it. And then the fourth thing is, well, everybody might be used to you being a people pleaser or not setting boundaries, not having boundaries. And there might be some negative reactions to you setting a boundary. And so sometimes there's some retaliation, and that can be painful. So there are these 4 different phases I feel are really important when it comes to learning to set boundaries.
Oh, thank you for breaking that down. That was super clear because the awareness piece is obviously the first step. And sometimes that's the hardest, like not realizing that you're not merged with people around you. You are your own entity, and it's okay to advocate for what's important to you. And nobody's going to do that except for you. So it's like, it's just like yoga, it's a practice.
Absolutely. Day by day.
Yeah. Okay, so what would you say if someone wanted to practice setting boundaries? What are like 3 things women can do to be more conscious in their communication style?
Yeah, so this is a really good question as well, and I have like so many things to recommend. It's hard to choose just 3, but I'll do my best here to choose 3. So, um, the first thing that I would recommend is really to, you know, when you're working up the courage to set a boundary or to communicate something to someone consciously, there might be a lot of fear around it. There might be a lot of nervousness and worry about how someone is going to respond. And if you're really sensitive, that can be, really hard to manage internally. And so the first tool that I like to offer up is central nervous system healing of some sort. And there are all kinds of ways to do that, as you know. So some of my favorites are deep breathing and feeling my feet on the ground. I like to tap as well. And, I also like to dance and shake. There's all kinds of different things that you can do. And restorative yoga practice is actually a really, really great tool for helping to regulate the central nervous system as well. The second thing that I would recommend is I love this book called Crucial Conversations: Tools for Talking When Stakes Are High. So the authors are Carrie Patterson, Joseph Grenny, Ron McMillan, and Al Switzler. So it's the reason I love this book is because it really helps you understand your communication style when you're under stress, and also how other people communicate when they're under stress. And it gives you frameworks for being able to work with those styles and being able to kind of take the emotion out of it
Mm.
in a way that helps you focus on what it is that you're trying to say, and the mutual purpose and goals and respect that will help other people hear you. So that's the second thing. The third thing I would just suggest working with a coach, because the coach can scale practices for you that will be tailored for what you need in order to help you feel more confident in those conscious communications.
I love that. Is that something that you offer coaching on?
Absolutely. Yes. My copy of this book is worn almost to pieces, because I even with clients who come to me with other topics for coaching, a lot of times
Mhm.
communication is a big piece of it. And so we often work with the tools in that particular book and in other ways as well.
I love that. I'm a very big fan of coaching and having that accountability too. So, if somebody wanted to just take better care of their own mental health, do you have any other resources other than coaching?
Absolutely. So, of course, yoga and meditation, breath work, the central nervous system healing
Mm.
techniques that we've spoken about. I also see a therapist when I feel like I need it. I feel there's no shame in that, and we can, as a society, continue to reduce the stigma around that.
Mhm.
And also finding community. I really have benefited from finding community in both online and in real life spaces. So I think that's an important component as well. And
Mhm.
I'm personally getting more and more into the practice of journaling
Mm.
for my mental health.
Oh, I love that. That's wonderful. And my last question is around happiness. I find that sometimes people will say, I will be happy when I lose the weight. I will
Mm.
be happy when I make the six figures. I will be happy when I move to wherever. I will be happy when I get married. I will be happy when I have the baby, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, it's actually backwards. You have to embody happiness and thrive before all those things show up. That's actually the secret. So what is your relationship to happiness? And, do you feel happy?
Absolutely. This is a great question as well. And I'm so glad you brought in the examples of people who delay their happiness,
Mhm.
waiting for whatever event that they think is going to bring happiness. It's one of the things that I really love about yoga is that it teaches us to find happiness inside instead of being dependent on external factors like waiting until I lose the weight, or until I make a certain amount of money, or until I have the baby, or whatever it might be. Those are all external factors, when in fact happiness is available to all of us at any time when we go inside to find it. And that's not to say that there aren't things that happen in life that make us unhappy and make us sad, and it's not like we're supposed to just ignore all of that.
Mhm.
But I think what's important is to, when you are unhappy, realize, okay, something's going on here. My emotions and maybe even my body are telling me something. So, can I sit with that discomfort long enough to try to understand what's underneath it so
Mm,
that I can then find my way back to joy and back to happiness?
I love that. And it's so funny, like, of course, as the universe works, after we spoke earlier and you were explaining the 8 limbs of yoga, I went to a yoga class, and sure enough, we were talking about the 8 limbs of yoga. And I felt so like the star student because I knew what she was talking about. And the lesson was about stealing, non stealing. And she's like, when you think of stealing, you say, well, of course, I pay for my clothes, I pay for my food, I don't steal. But as the example of what we were talking about, delaying the happiness, that is a form of stealing from yourself. You could step into that full experience of feeling joy, no matter where you are in your life. So I thought that was really eye opening, and made me think of how else can I step into joy and get out of my head.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the beautiful thing about those 8 limbs, and especially those first 5, including non-stealing, is that, we often think of them in terms of our interactions with others, but they also apply to our interactions with ourselves. And I love
Mhm.
your example of how when we delay our happiness, that's actually stealing from ourselves.
Yeah. It's you wouldn't think about it, but it's true on some level when you dive deeper into, stealing and everything. Um,
Absolutely.
well, I know that you have a special gift for the community, and I'm just curious if you could share more about that and where to find it.
Absolutely. Yes. So I have created a short restorative yoga practice just for your people, Michelle.
Aw,
And in it, you'll find just 3 main poses. So there's one pose just to kind of open up the body initially, and then the 3 main poses, and then everyone's favorite, Shavasana, corpse pose, at the end. And I chose these 3 main poses that are in the middle there for their specific effects on calming the mind, engaging the rest and relax setting of your nervous system, and giving you a good stretch at the same time. And so, in just a few minutes, you can go from feeling frazzled to calm, exhausted to refreshed, and scrunched up to nice and open. And so, that gift is available on my website at www.wellnesswithtami.com. And Tami is spelled Tami. So, wellnesswithtami.com/quick calming, all one word.
well, thank you. I am going to write that down so we include that in the show notes. So,
Perfect.
where else can people find you if they want to learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, so the best place is my website, wellnesswithtami.com. Again, Tami. And I'm also on Instagram. My handle on Instagram is at wellnesswtami.
Beautiful. Well, is there anything that you want to share before we head out here?
I'm just so, so grateful for this opportunity, Michelle. I really, really appreciate it. It's been so fun getting to know you better. And I hope that what I've shared is helpful.
Oh, it's been amazing. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that we got to get to know each other, and I'm excited to continue on into the future. So,
Absolutely.
thank you. You've inspired us all to look at the great yoga wall and wherever we are, and to just deepen our practice with self-love. Thank you.